Hello everyone, today I'm going to be showing you guys how I jelly printed with the brand new ARTEZA iridescent paints that I received this afternoon in the mail. I had never before used ARTEZA acrylic paints, so I was really excited to use them for the first time, and I didn't have any iridescent paints on hand, so I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to use these iridescent paints to jelly print onto black paper today. So I'm going to actually just be using some black cardstock from the craft store and using several of the same items that I typically use to create texture, as well as my trusty Gelli Arts jelly plate and my trusty speedball brayer to actually spread out that ARTEZA paint. Let's talk about the consistency of the paint. It was really smooth and I had no problem spreading it onto my jelly plate. The only issue that I would mention, if it's even an issue, is that some of the colors that are seen on the bottles, like you could see that I started off with a purple color, like a purple lilac color, didn't necessarily transfer in that exact same hue when I printed onto the black paper. Notice that that same purple color that you can see on my brayer right now appeared to be gold when I printed on the black paper. Now, I love those little surprises and I love the spontaneity of jelly printing. However, if I was working on a project that specifically called for a color scheme using purple, I would have been very disappointed that I would have had to start over because the print would have come out in gold. So that's something to be aware of if you're going to be using these paints, whether it's for jelly printing the way I'm doing right now or for actual painting itself. The actual texture of the paints was beautiful. You could see it captured some of the textures that are already created onto the jelly plate. And again, I had no problem spreading the paint, and it was highly pigmented, so that's a plus on my book. Here I'm just using some parchment paper, and I'm ripping the parchment paper sporadically to create a distressed edge, and I wanted to test how well the paint was going to peel off of the paper, meaning I have experienced some issues before with cheap acrylic paint that when I put it down onto the jelly plate and then I use some kind of paper mask, I end up ripping the paper because the paint adheres to the paper itself and the paper is then adhering to the jelly plate. I've had very bad experiences with that. So I was a little bit weary that it would happen again because I'm not experienced using ARTEZA acrylics. However, as you're about to see, I did not experience that problem. And by the way, how beautiful is that that golden to red sunset kind of color that I produced with that yellow paint. But notice when I'm going and ripping off those pieces of the parchment paper, I had no problems with it. They came off beautifully, and I was actually able to use some more parchment paper to just completely clean off the plate and leave it clean for the next color. After spreading out this really beautiful pink color onto my jelly plate, I started using some of the feathers and the parchment paper together onto the jelly plate because I wanted to see how well the paints would retain the hairs or bristles or whatever you want to call them on the actual feathers. And I was very careful to use the same techniques that I've used before, where I go and press down really hard with that lid from the ball jar to basically try to get all those little details, and I'm happy to say that I had no problems and they transferred really well onto the paper, as you can clearly see here. It may be a little bit difficult, which is why I'm moving the paper back and forth for you to see, but that's just the nature of iridescent paints. You kind of have to move back and forth to see each individual shift in the color. Here I was using one of the Gelli Arts card scrapers that come with the deckled edge already cut into the card to go and start making some beautiful lines across the surface of this magenta kind of coral pink paint. And you can see right now, as I'm about to go and print onto the black cardstock, how it retains the marks of the actual lines that I cut into the paint. And I'm happy that that looks so beautiful, and I love the actual shift from the purples to the pinks that I was able to create with that pink iridescent paint. But I also love that I've actually retained all of those strokes that I created with the card, because in the past I've experienced difficulties with cheap paint where it gets a little messy and the marks aren't quite as clean and quite as obvious on the actual finished product. Here I'm using a refrigerator shelf liner to press a bumpy texture onto the plate and print with that onto my black paper. Because these acrylic paints were performing so well, I decided to start clipping some of the leaves from my beautiful little table plant and adhere them, or not adhere them, rather press them onto the Gelli plate to see if I could use those as masks onto the print. And typically I only like to use my golden open acrylics when I'm using these organic objects, because they are the only ones that can actually simulate the texture really well when onto the print. But I have to say, once again, ARTEZA surprised me positively, because as you're about to see momentarily, the mask of the leaves actually transferred over really well onto the paper. I didn't have any problems with the leaves tearing or sticking to the plate because of the paint or anything like that. As you can see, they're really beautiful, and I'm particularly in love with that one I just pointed to because for some reason it looks like a bird to me and not necessarily a leaf. So once again, ARTEZA, they definitely know what they're doing, and I'm very eager to try more of their brand paints on my Gelli plate soon. So here is the results of my experimentation this evening. I'm very, very excited about how well I printed with these paints. As you can see, none of these prints are what I would call finished because I like doing multi-layered prints. But these are really fun experiments, and I can't wait to pick them up next time and continue building up subsequent layers with those same ARTEZA iridescent paints. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.